Welcome back, friends. We got the first week of data in with the new Dataslate rules and mission pack. It'll be a bit of a quicker video because we only have 1 week of data to go through, but I got it all ready to go, so sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Before we get started with the old YouTube pleasantries, if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button. It helps push it out there for more people to see. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to make sure you get all my latest videos. And if you're looking for other ways to help support me, you can check out my Patreon, patreon.com/warfriends. Link is in the description below. Any help is greatly appreciated. All right, guys, let's get started. So I thought I might do something a little different. I created a poll on the Patreon for everyone to guess which 5 armies will have the top 5 win rates for the next data slate. You can get to the poll by going to the Patreon. The link is in the description below. You can sign up as a free member. You don't have to pay anything. And basically, you just go there and you pick which armies you think are going to be the top 5 armies. Make sure you fill out your either YouTube or Patreon name. And at the end of the data slate, I'll combine all the numbers together and we'll give a little shout out to whoever got closest. Let me know if this is something you guys are interested in, or if you like this, or you want to see some more stuff like this, and I'll try to come up with some more ideas moving forward. I'm going to leave the poll open until this time next week when the next week's video releases, and then I'm going to close it down to make sure you get your poll submitted, and we'll go through the results in about, 10 to 12 weeks. All right, let's get started. So like I said, this is the first week of the new data slate, so all my data slate data has been reset, so we only have 1 week of data here. So last week we had 985 players, just over 5,600 players, and we had 15 tournaments for the week. First thing we're going to look at is the win percentage by armies for the previous week. Just a quick reminder, Games Workshop acceptable win rate is 45 to 55%. So anything in that range will be in green, anything 5% above or below will be in orange, and anything above or below that will be in red. Coming in last week at number 1 was Leagues of Votann at 58%. Thousand Sons at 56 were number 2. Necrons, Imperial Knights, and Adeptus Custodes were all tied at 55%. Then we had Death Guards at 54%. Down at the bottom, we had Agents at 29, Death Watch at 34, Black Templars at 38, Dark Angels at 39, and Orks at 41. I have the arrows here show the changes versus last week. I know it's a bit of a weird week because of all the different changes that happened with the rules and stuff, but I just thought I'd throw them in there anyways, just so you guys can see how the armies are moving around. So Votann, surprising coming out on top this week. I would have thought it would have been Thousand Sons or Death Guard with their new codexes, but Votann popping up at 58%. We'll see how that maintains going forward. Thousand Sons, great first week with their new codex, 56% win rate. Then we had a good results from Death Guard with 54, and even Sisters at 52. They had a pretty good week, so hopefully they can maintain this sort of results going forward and can maintain around the 50% win rate after some of the more positive changes they had. Emperor's Children dropped down a little bit, just below 50%, but still right within that average. Same as World Leaders at 48. A couple armies with new codexes, so just maintaining around the meta averages, and there's nothing wrong with that. Aeldari and Tyranids both had a little bit of a down week compared to last week, 48 and 46% respectively. Aeldari, we'll see how they fall as the weeks go with all the changes. We'll see if people keep playing them as much as they have been, and if they keep getting the results. I suspect they'll drop a little bit down. They won't be near the top, but we'll see. And down at the bottom there, we have Orks at 41%. I think it's going to be a pretty rough data slate for Orks moving forward here. They've had 3 or 4 weeks of pretty rough results, and it's not getting any better now, and especially they didn't really get any changes in the data slate to make it better, so it's going to be a rough go for the next little bit. Dark Angels, a little disappointing to see after all the changes and the new detachment they had. They're still at 39%. Give it a few weeks for the player base to sort of figure it out and adjust, because it is, everything, there's a lot of new stuff going on right now, so hopefully they can bump that up a little bit. Even though Black Templars didn't get a ton of changes, I was hoping they'd do a little bit better than 38%. Like I mentioned, it is new data slate, new rules, and all that stuff, so we'll have to give them a few weeks to sort of smooth out any of the wrinkles, but I was hoping for a little bit better on their first week. And then poor Agents, 29% win rate, and they still went up from last week, so ugh. But overall, I think it was a pretty good first week. We had a couple armies doing really well and a couple armies doing really poorly, which is par for the course, but most of it is green. So moving into the new data slate here, it's not looking too bad. We'll have to see how it unfolds over the next couple weeks. All right, moving on, we have army representation. So this is the percentage of the player base. So the average representation is about 3.6, 3.7%. So if everyone was playing every army equally, they would all be at about 3.7%. So anything above that, there's more players. Anything below that is less players than the average. So Death Guard remains on top, 7.8% of the meta. Necrons at 6.6, Tyranids at 6.3, Blood Angels at 6.1, World Leaders at 5.8, and Thousand Sons at 5.7. And then down at the bottom, we have Agents at 0.1, Templars at 1, Death Watch at 1.1, then AdMech and Gene Stealers both at 1.5. Not surprised to see Death Guard up there. They didn't really get any changes done in the data slate, and they were doing really well before. Now they did drop down a percentage point. Now, some of that was eaten up by Thousand Suns because they jumped way up. They've been down around the 1.5 to 2%. And over the last couple of weeks, they've jumped up to almost 6%. So it's like triple or almost 4 times what they were. Blood Angels and World Eaters still up there. World Eaters still they're a popular army anyways. And the new codex, they're still getting quite a bit of play. They're getting decent results, so that's not going to deter too many people. Kind of in the middle there, Orks, they're still in the green, but they dropped way down. They were up, 4, 5, 6% for pretty much the entire last data slate. Now they're down around 2.7%, so it's the first time I've seen them that low in a long time. And they could drop lower based on the results they're getting. So we'll have to see how the Orc army shapes out over the next few weeks. But I don't have too high hopes here based on the first week of numbers. And down to bottom, Sisters had a 1.9% rep. I expect that's going to go up a little bit if they keep getting the good results. I don't expect them to be up near 4 or 5%, but closer to the 3% would be nice to see. And then all the other ones at the bottom are just, par for the course. Deathwatch, Black Templars, Gene Stealers, and AdMech. They're just some of the lower played armies almost all the time anyway. So I suspect they'll be at the bottom even if they do get a lot of buffs, which they didn't. So not unsurprising. It was a decent first week. The chart's not as skewed as it has been, but it's still going to always look this way. And interesting to see some armies move up and some armies move down. Even Emperor's Children, they dropped down to 2.5%. They've been well above the average since they came out, so it could just be that everyone dusted off their Thousand Suns, pun intended, and taking some players away from Emperor's Children and that stuff, all these people who had them on the shelves. So we'll see if they get their players back or if they kind of just fall down into that 3% range moving forward. Next up is the combined stats for previous week. So we have Army win rates, XOX1 percentage, and representation. So just a quick reminder, XOX1 percentage is the percentage of players who didn't lose any games or only lost one game at a tournament. So examples going 5-0 or 4-1. It's not a perfect stat, but it's kind of a good indication of how the players are doing. So the higher the XOX1, the more likely you're going to be at those top tables and a chance to win a tournament. If you have a really low XOX1, most of the people are struggling and they're really not getting out of those bottom tables there and really no chance to win tournaments. So it's a decent indicator of who is having more success and has a higher likelihood of winning tournaments as the players are performing well overall. So coming in at number 1, last week we had Leagues of Votann, then we had Death Guard, Thousand Suns, Necrons, and Imperial Knights, and down at the bottom we had Imperial Agents, Black Templars, Deathwatch, Space Wolves, and Orcs. Votann leading the way with almost a 30% XOX1. 1 in 3 Votann players didn't lose any games or only lost one game, so that's a really good week for them. Now, they had a little bit of a lower rep compared to the other armies at the top, but they got carried by their high win percentage and high X1. And then you have 2 armies that both had new codexes recently, Death Guard and Thousand Suns. Very similar stats. The only kind of difference is Death Guard has a few more players, so that props them up a little bit more. But overall, the armies are performing pretty similarly. And Sisters had a really good week, 52% win rate, over 20% XOX1. The average is about 15 to 16% for XOX1. Changes a little bit week to week, but really good results for Sisters after some of the changes that were made in the data slate, so that's good to see. Then you have some armies with like Chaos Demons. They had 51% win rate, so that's really good, but they only had 11% XOX1. So they had a lot of players right around the mid boards, probably going 3-2, 2-3. Didn't have too many players getting to the top tables there. So there's an army where those stats, if they continue, they kind of be sort of like a mid-board army. They don't have whatever it takes to sort of get to those top tables. So you can kind of see which armies are sort of dominating, which ones are living mid-board, and which ones are living at the bottom boards. So speaking of the bottom boards, we had 4 armies with 0% XOX1 last week. You had Agents, Templars, Space Wolves, and AdMech. So those are armies that they didn't have great win percentages, which is not surprising, but they struggled to even have one player do well at a tournament. So those armies had no chance of winning tournaments and just miserable weeks overall. And then there's Orcs, 41% win rate, and then 3.7% of the players had XOX1. So there's one person who did well with Orcs, and they had a decent rep at 2.7%. So they struggled really bad. Same as Dark Angels, 3% rep, which is almost the average, and only a 6% XOX1. So a couple armies there who kind of got steamrolled all weekend. So, I mean, it's kind of a wonky week. This chart can kind of fluctuate a lot week to week, and we only have 1 week of data for this data slate, so it should start to normalize over the next few weeks as we get some more results in. But definitely some armies had a tough go of it, so we'll have to see how that shakes out going forward. But hopefully we can smooth it a little bit in some of those armies like Orcs, Dark Angels, And, Grey Knights, who had really low XOX1, can find some footing, get some wins, and bring those numbers up closer to the average there. All right, next up is the tournament wins for each army. So last week, Death Guard just keeps on rolling with 5 tournament wins. Thousand Sons had 2, Imperial Knights had 2, Tyranids, Necrons, Votann, Emperor Children, Chaos Space Marines, and Guard all had 1. So the Thousand Sons, they got 2 wins with their new codex, so that's good to see. Death Guard is just, they have a really high rep, so that does help get them more wins because there's just more players, but they just keep dominating. So we'll have to see if they're the new Orks from the last Dataslate, if they're just going to run away with this, or if people are going to be able to sort of slow them down a little bit and catch up. But it's a pretty dominating first week for results. And looking at the Subfaction tournament wins, just kind of get an idea of where each army got their wins. For Death Guard, Virulent Victorium got 4, so that's the clear favorite. For Thousand Sons, Grand Coven got both their wins. And Tyranids, it was nice to see the new detachment, the Subterranean Assault, got a win for them, so that's kind of fun. And then Mortarion's Hammer was the other army that got a win for Death Guard. So like I said, it's a shorter week, so we only have 1 week a day to go through, so we're moving right on to the faction focus. So I thought it would be a fun time just to take a look at Thousand Sons and see what their numbers look like after their first week. So as you can see over their previous 8-week results there, their huge army rep jump over the last couple weeks since their codex came out. Definitely people are excited to get back into the army now that they actually have some more options, and their win percentage has been doing really well, but it is improving a little bit over week, so definitely some play there with the new codex. Looking at the army stats versus the meta average, the win percentage for last week was 56% versus 49.7 for the meta average, so well above there. Army rep is 5.7 versus 3.6, so above there, and the XOX1 is 21 versus 14.3, so it's had a really good week, well above all the averages, including tournament wins. So if these numbers keep up, they could have a pretty good data slate for the next 10 to 12 weeks here. Looking at the Subfaction player count, people are clearly liking or finding the most options within Grand Coven, 58% of the player base, and also kind of shakes out in the win percentage with 59% win rate, with the next highest being 53%. So if there's any Thousand Sons players, you can let me know what makes Grand Coven so appealing or so good compared to the rest of the detachments, because so far it seems to be the clear favorite, and it did pick up both their tournament wins as well. All right, and moving on, we're going to move on to the other end of the spectrum. We're looking at Orks. So this is an army that's struggling a little bit. So looking at their previous 8-week results, you can see their army rep is pretty much just plummeting week over week. They're up around like 5.5, and then down into the 4s, and then just straight down into under 3%. And you can kind of mirror that with their win percentage, which was around 50%, and now it's barely getting over 45% if they're lucky. So they're definitely in a pretty rough spot. We didn't really see any changes in the data slate that's going to give any hope that they're going to be performing any better. So I think it's going to be a lot of the same moving forward, and going to be a rough 10 to 12 weeks for the Orks here. Looking at their stats versus the meta average, win percentage 41 versus 49.7, way below. Army rep is below at 2.7 versus 3.6. XOX1 is abysmal, 3.7 versus 14, and they didn't get any tournament wins last week. Subfaction player count, War Horde is basically the only one people are taking, 50%. With all the other options that they have, and they have a lot of detachments, they can barely make up 50% of the army with everything else. So clearly people are just either resigned to the fact that War Horde is the only option, or it's just the best one available after everything else has been nerfed into the ground. And the win percentage kind of reflects it, 42% for War Horde, which, if you have 50% of players and only 42% win rate, it's going to reflect negatively on the stats. Mordak had 60%, but they only had, I think, 1 player, so can't really look too much into that. So if there's any Ork players, let me know in the comments what your thoughts on Orks are and what you'd like to see changed or improved upon, and if War Horde is the only option you guys really have. And let me know if you see any potential in any of the other detachments like Dread Mob or the Big Hunter, anything like that, or if you're kind of just stuck with War Horde after the nerfs to everything else. Hopefully Ork players can find something in there, but I have a feeling it's going to be a pretty rough go. All right, guys, and that's it. Like I said, it's going to be a short one this week, so thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to make sure you get all my latest videos. Check out the Patreon if you're looking for any other ways to help support me, and also check out the Patreon to make sure you can sign up and fill out the poll so we can go through the results at the end of the data slate together. Good luck in the tournaments coming up next weekend, guys, and I will see you next week.